It is a real pleasure to join you today at the inaugural Climate Futures Summit at the University of Melbourne. I want to thank the University of Melbourne for your continued work to address the climate crisis through programs like this, as well as with your various educational and research initiatives. I'm also extremely appreciative of your institution serving as the host of the Australia Pacific branch of the climate NGO that I founded and chair, the Climate Reality Project. I'm here today virtually because we find ourselves at a critical inflection point in our race to tackle the climate crisis. Around the world, and particularly in the Pacific region, we are seeing the catastrophic consequences of the climate crisis with increasing frequency and intensity. In addition to the heat waves and the wildfires and the downpours and the droughts that we're experiencing on land, we know that 93% of all the extra heat energy that's trapped by the greenhouse gases we're dumping into our atmosphere is absorbed in our planet's oceans. And as the world's largest ocean, covering virtually half of the planet, the Pacific absorbs more greenhouse gases and more heat trapped by the greenhouse gases than any other body of water on Earth. The list of resulting impacts, from stronger typhoons, cyclones, and hurricanes to the kind of rain bombs that flooded much of southeast Australia this year. I think of the community of Lismore, for example, and so many others. These impacts go on, threatening true catastrophe for many Pacific Island nations and frontline communities across Australia, New Zealand, and the many other nations that neighbor the Pacific. I'd also like to recognize the courage and leadership of Pacific Island nations in the face of some of the gravest climate threats in the world. The conviction and moral clarity from Pacific Island leaders on this issue has been critical in sounding the alarm so that other nations could hear and respond. This year, Pacific Island Forum leaders declared a climate emergency and formally reaffirmed that climate change is, in their words, the single greatest existential threat facing the Blue Pacific, end quote. These leaders are fierce advocates for climate science and climate action, partly because they're living with the consequences of humanity's decision to ignore the warning signs that we've been given with such clarity. Their calls to limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees are not just for the sake of ambition. Meeting this target is actually going to determine whether whole nations can continue a viable, livable future in the places they have called home for so many generations. Every year, their voices are integral to international climate negotiations. And this year, at COP27 in Egypt, the global community must heed the calls of the Pacific Islands and commit to moving from pledges to action. Fortunately, there has been significant progress from some key nations this year. You'll forgive my national pride as an American, but I believe the Inflation Reduction Act passed in the United States is really a true game changer for my country. The United States was key to building momentum for the ambitious emissions reductions targets in the lead up to COP26 last year in Glasgow by pledging to cut our own emissions of 50 to 52% by 2030. And now this new law shows that America is in fact serious about taking action to meet that goal and is making the long-term investments to get there. We're also seeing similar ambition from Australia. Thank you. One of the first priorities of the new Australian government was to pass legislation that nearly doubles Australia's commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions to 43% by 2030. This legislation, combined with strong investment in clean energy and laws requiring cuts in emissions, will provide climate solutions and strengthen Australia's voice in support of international action. But there's more work to be done, and we need to do it quickly. We need other nations, especially the biggest emitters like China, to do more. All countries should be strengthening their 2030 emission reduction targets to align with the Paris Agreement and keep the 1.5 degree target alive. We need further efforts to facilitate a just transition by ensuring funding for developing nations in order to implement climate solutions and adapt to the impacts they're already experiencing. That means additional financing from both governments and from the private sector. We also need to protect our planet's biodiversity, which includes our forests and oceans. The Pacific Ocean and the forests of Pacific Island nations, such as Papua New Guinea, are important carbon sinks that are essential to protecting the fragile balance of life on Earth. Above all, we need to continue to foster collaboration in the Pacific region and around the globe. So I applaud the work of the Pacific Islands Forum in serving as a powerful voice and forum for cooperation on the climate crisis. And I hope today's conversation serves as an opportunity to advance climate action in Australia, the Pacific, and around the world. I want to end by encouraging everyone in attendance today to find a way to drive climate action in your community. Whether in your work, your advocacy, or your choices as a consumer, you have an important role to play in solving the climate crisis. So let's get to work. Thank you.